name is Rick. Here in the Dwarven Fortress of Swamp Cavern, we've killed a lot of things with crossbows. We've used them to soften up many goblin invasions. We've battled hydras and were creatures. Here's everything I did in Swamp Cavern to make crossbow teams more useful. The fortifications on the fort let them fire outside of it or into the central area if that's where we wanted to fight. If we shut the other doors, the enemy would have no choice but to bring it to us here. If a crossbow user wanted to abandon their post and go fight outside, they had a bit of a journey ahead of them. They would have to walk down several flights of stairs and go down a long hallway to do it. I feel that making firing a crossbow the shorter distance forces even bad crossbow users to try. The starting front door of the fort had these fortifications right away. Again, had a door, could lock them in there if I needed to. Never came up, not really. We had a alternate, fancier siege entrance. We could have shut every other door in the fort, forced opponents to come in through this way, and in that event, the crossbow teams would stand by these fortifications. We would have also been ready with ballista fire, cage traps, a giant cave spider ready to spew webs on cage traps, just in case anything spectacular enough came along to warrant that kind of tactic. At every cave entrance, there was a place with lockable doors, a drawbridge, and a place one level up for the crossbow team to stand. In the future, I would make these entrances longer to make them more useful. Easily the hardest part of training a crossbow team is getting them to pick up the crossbow for the first time and take some shots. Getting crossbow teams to train is often like getting a bunch of stubborn idiots to do something that they really don't want to do. Part of the problem is that shooting at an archery target builds up XP towards the skill only very slowly, like 1/10 the speed of shooting at a live target. It's still worth it. I use both methods. That's one of the reasons I like to trap wildlife and cave creatures. I repeatedly let them loose in this training area, with one or both crossbow teams stationed in the narrow hallway behind fortifications. When they're not doing that, this fort is in the untamed wilds, so there's a never-ending supply of mosquito men, or giant birds, to shoot down on the surface, or crundles and hungry heads to practice on in the caves. Eventually, one of the teams hit level 20 in crossbow skill, and I turned off target practice for them in order to save on ammunition. They fought enough stuff on a daily basis, they were not going to get rusty. In earlier forts, I would assign a few dwarves to be hunters, even set them up with hunting dogs. In a less hostile biome, hunters would sharpen their skills on ducks, deer, whatever you have, and they would train up far faster than teams shooting at unmoving targets. On the one hand, you get archers that are extremely skilled fast, but they also take on more than they can handle and die while you're not paying attention. Usually only about half the ones I would try this with would survive. Also, you can't really have hunters in the military because of the uniform conflict problem, so it's one or the other. Or you could end up in a situation where your supposed crossbow team spends all their time changing clothes. In the past, some of my best militia captains were former hunters, but I don't use this method anymore. In Swamp Cavern, I didn't do this. I just relied on lots of training time and the hostile environment for practice. Instead of having a hunter hunt the wildlife, I would just send out a crossbow team for a semi-annual hunt and target fire practice versus local wildlife. If cage traps are too gamey for you, have your guys go out and kill wildlife for practice, or go into hostile caves with backup and proper equipment. Swamp Cavern had tons of metal, but any fort in any world can supply their crossbow team just by focusing on it enough. I tried to store a lot of it close by where it would be used. Since I never knew if that was going to be from a siege on the surface or forgotten beasts in the lower levels, mostly that meant keeping it by the stairs. Silver ammunition is the best because of its weight, I'm told. Steel is extravagant, but I make a few steel bolts anyway, just for fun. It's not as heavy, but it can be sharper. When you get a report that a masterfully made steel bolt has slammed into something, it's just satisfying. The other metals are fine too. I'll buy them from traders just to have more around. If I didn't have metal, I'd just buy metal objects from traders and melt them down. I don't usually buy bolts from traders, but I would if my fort was low on reserves. I really kept my eye on my military teams to make sure they had weapons at all times. When you set up a squad, check on them to make sure they are picking up everything they are supposed to. I had my crossbow teams all set to train with the other warriors. They probably practice dodging and biting as much as firing the crossbow, but that's fine. They still get really good in a couple of years. They got good at using the high-quality armor that was issued to them. They got practice deflecting blows with the shields issued to them. When it comes to getting troops to show up, that can be a problem for any squad. Even under good circumstances, order a squad of 10 to go somewhere. What are you going to get? Usually maybe 7 if you're lucky. Someone is sleeping or eating or endlessly shuffling equipment. That's partly why I like having 2 squads of crossbow teams. I'd have more if I had more dwarves in the fort or more of a focus on fighting and raiding. If you give orders for troops to station and few or no guys show up, that can be a sign you've been pushing them too hard. For instance, by having them stationed for too long of a period of time, so their needs build up. I think training nonstop can do this also, just not as badly. When you tell your crossbow team to attack, you have to do it the right way, or they just won't obey you. If your guys are in the fort and you tell them to attack giant birds outside, they won't see a way to get at them, and will interpret this as an order to do whatever they feel like. To get them to shoot at giant birds outside, you have to move them to where they can see them. If you order them to where they can see an opponent, they are good about getting the idea and firing. If you build a fortification on ground level and order them to stand by it, they might choose to stand outside of it. That's why I put my fortifications on the 2nd level. This keeps troops from running outside of the fort on their own at the start of a battle. So, short answers for how to make crossbow teams more useful. Make them. Put them where they have to shoot the crossbow or go out of their way. Train them up so they're more likely to fire and to do any good when they do so. Move them to where you want them to fight from. When they see something hostile, they'll figure it out, hopefully. Give them all the equipment they could ever need. Have orders to carry ammo. Make sure they never run out of bolts. When they do use up their bolts in combat, try to keep them nearby so that they can get more and come back while the fight is still going on. If you give them armor, make sure they get trained in how to use it. If you don't give them armor, keep them out of harm's way. If your fort is in a hostile environment, or you're using them to raid places, have more than one team. If they see a better chance of biting a monster or bashing it with their crossbow, then that's what they are going to do, no matter how ridiculous it is. You did what you could. If they get stomped on by a mega beast, that's pretty much on them. When I talked about my experience on the Dwarf Fortress forums, I got some really good feedback. Here it is in no particular order. Steel crossbows for extra bashing power when they do. Crossbow teams are uniquely suited for fighting fire breathers. Rank 6 really helps with shield blocking, in their observation. I don't doubt them. I feel the same way about web shooters. It's not hard for a crossbow team to wound a giant cave spider badly enough that it gives in to the pain and stops fighting. One player recommends trapping the teams in place. They used locked doors and had a couple of beds and a food and drink stockpile inside that area. If the dwarves really insisted on doing something else, they could do it right there. I did actually set this fort up in several places so that I could lock the crossbow teams from running into combat, and I did include bolts in that area, but it didn't occur to me to try the other stuff. The player mentioned it's more work, but even off-duty fighters will pitch in and help if they have the weapons and can see the enemy. If you had a part of your fort where your teams were constantly firing from, that sounds like a good idea to me. Training versus wildlife, you have to tell them specifically. When I would train versus hungry heads, I'd send them in on move command and let them fight for themselves. I'd also send a backup melee team, because those things are always swooping down and attacking, and the melee teams would get some practice, even kills. Only when they were in the same area as the last of the hostile monsters would I ever tell them to hunt the monsters specifically. I like that when they finish doing it, they go back to whatever they were doing before automatically. But when it comes to fighting wildlife, send them to where they can see it and then order them to kill it. Make sure mining, hunting, and woodcutting are all disabled for your team and all military. Use station orders. Move them where they need to be and let them figure it out. Ordering them to kill Kias outside the fort while they are in the middle of it and can't even see them will result in them goofing off or doing whatever they feel like. Station them where they see things at first and then end up out of line of sight. Make sure you have enough ammo. Don't store ammo in bins. Don't try to be too efficient with ammo locations. Dwarves seek out the best ammo, not the closest. Melt or trade used ammo. They don't like it and it doesn't stack nice. Undead are good for target practice, especially if you leave their armor on. Bolts are not good versus killing undead. Steel bolts are slightly better, but expensive, which is why they make good target practice. Live targets are often quite fast to hurt, to the point where they stop fighting back. Actually, killing them with bolts might take quite a while. Figuring out how schedule, alert, burrow works helps. You can put them in a burrow to get them to actually stand next to fortifications. Crossbow teams seem to do quite okay as part of an invasion force. Crossbow teams are handy versus werebeasts. They can stand back and injure it. Also after their attacks, too. I have a few reactions to this advice, at least some of the parts I have experience with. If you want your team to go outside the fort and fight a flying enemy, whether it's in the caves or on the surface, you need to use the move command to move them to a place where they can fire from, not order them to attack the enemy specifically as the dwarves are sitting in the fort. About the schedule, alert, burrow command, Captain Duck the YouTuber was great at this. I think he used schedules to make his archers patrol the walls and alerts to make them stand right up against the fortifications. Go watch Captain Duck's videos if you want to see the master of getting the crossbow guys to stand in the right spot. I used the move order to move the crossbow teams in my fort, and it worked just fine, but I had elaborate defenses and well-trained guys. They could stand back a square or two and hit through the defenses no problem. About werebeasts. We had this thing in our fort where werebeasts kept turning in the tavern in the heart of our fortress. Survivors were brought into this hospital and locked in. I put these fortifications in case anyone ever changes. The thing is, I hear if a soldier is the first to see someone change, they can cause a loyalty cascade when they attack. So the plan was to have a crossbow team standing by, ready on the night of the full moon, in the hallway nearby, and have them move to the fortifications only if werebeasts had transformed. For all the waves of werebeasts we got, we were lucky in this fort. Even though we got hit several times, they either killed their victims outright or failed to pass on their curse, even after some bad injuries in some cases. One thing I've heard of, but not had the chance to try, is if you can catch a necromancer and put them where you can control if they see some corpses, you can have a pretty much infinite supply of good target practice. Make sure the crossbow team can't see the necromancer, only the targets. One of my friends caught a bronze colossus trapped in a small part of his base, so he carved one wall into fortifications and equipped his team with wooden bolts. Any team stationed by it would get trained up rather quickly as the monster ran around randomly. If you'd like to see this fortress using crossbows to fight forgotten beasts or goblin sieges, check out just about any one of my videos. The more recent ones are actually pretty good. I'm partial to Swamp Cavern vs. Hydra. Coming up on the screen is going to be my Dwarf Fortress tutorials. Check those out if you like this one. I do Dwarf Fortress stuff with a focus on the exciting moments of a fort's life, but I also do pure storytelling, like the tale of the wandering giant cave spider, or the sad, often violent history of all the kings of this fort's civilization. YouTube has an opinion on which one of my videos you would like, so that's up there too. If you found this video helpful, please like, comment, or subscribe. If you do subscribe, you have to hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos come out. My tiny channel struggles to be found in a sea of videos of Dwarf Fortress clones and ripoffs. The fact that my channel has been kind of taking off lately probably has something to do with the huge number of likes it's been getting. I'd like to thank my fans for their continued support. I'm doing this for you guys and wouldn't want to disappoint you, so thanks.